So this tutorial is going to look at sort of expanding what we were doing in terms of creating a function that has parameters. So we have a function called orb, and it has parameters for diameter, x position, y position, and hue. So we create the orb, we pass these values into the parameters, and then we can manipulate those values in other functions. So if we look closely, we've got a size that's 20. We've got a global x and a global y. Those are 100 and 100. And then we've got a color, which is 185. So let's just make that 0 so it's bright red. So we create the orb, and every time it loops through the draw loop, it creates the orb. It sends a new global x and global y value and passes it to the orb function. So these are constantly changing based on what's happening here and here. But the size and the color stay the same. They're constantly being passed, so they're constantly they're constantly sending. Every time it goes through the draw loop, it sends this information repeatedly, but it never changes because it always looks the same. So if we run this, there's the orb. It's hitting the bounce test and it's bouncing back. Okay, so that's great. This is nice and efficient. Shows us how we're chunking code, which is really the focus of this. There are a lot of limitations to this. This is really an in-between step. You wouldn't necessarily do this, but this is an in-between step as we move towards classes, because there are a lot of problems with it, right? If I want to have a second orb, let's say it's 50, and say I want to have it start in the middle of the screen. So I'm just going to say 250, 250, right? That's what you would think, right? I'm going to center it on the screen, and I'm going to make it 100 for the color. Okay, so now if I run this, what do we expect? Do we expect two orbs moving? Because it says move bounce for both of them. So let's see what happens. Nothing happens. This isn't moving because we are constantly passing 250, 250. Every time we run through the draw loop, we're passing this x position and this y position to this instant of the orb function, and so it's static, right? Because global x and global y are not part of the definition of this orb. So if we wanted it to move, we'd have to pass global x. Oops. And global y into the function here. And if we did that, what are we going to get? Oh, now we're getting, this is sitting over the top of the red one, so you can't even see the red one anymore, right? So let's change the order here, put this below that because it's smaller, and so then this should sit on top, right? So now we've got a gorgeous bouncing olive. Okay, so this shows the limits of this to this point, where we can only have it sort of use global variables right now because of the limits of functions. So if we have a global y, let's invert these. So we'll put global y first and global x last. So we're switching the x and y coordinates. Let's see what kind of behavior we get. So we get some interesting sort of behavior that they're moving in exact opposite orientation to each other. So maybe that's something you'd want to use. I don't know. It's surprising. So, but the main thing is you can call a function, you can pass parameters to it, but if you want to have each of these functions separated, you have to use global variables, right? So I have x position and y position here. Those are the ones I really want to manipulate if I wanted them to move in different directions and at different speeds. So I'd say x position equals x position plus speed x. So it's telling me down here that the variable x position does not exist. Yes, it does. It's right here. And I've declared it right here. But remember, if you declare a variable inside of a function, especially within the parameters of a function, it's only visible within this space right here. It's only available inside of the function. It's not available in these other functions. It's not available in the draw loop. It's not available in setup. It's only visible inside of this function, which points to a limitation, but also an opportunity that classes will resolve. In the meantime, the most important thing here is to understand that you can pass values into a function to create unique instances of the construction of that function. And we will extend this idea when we introduce classes. So this is really the first step. So there's the notion of passing variables into a function, and there's also the notion of chunking actions or chunks of code into discrete functions that can be used repeatedly. So, and again, these ideas will translate into classes. The big thing is to understand local versus global variables and understand the idea of chunking specific pieces of code that do very discrete things into smaller bytes so that you create sort of module code. Okay.